Jai. It's always hard to stop. Did you like it, Manu Prabhu?
Yeah, it was excellent. Really good. I'm here just in the temple, and in the middle of it, somebody had to stop, so it kind of kind of.
Oh,
Oh,
But
you're
then
preaching while chanting.
but then they left, and I kind of got back into it again. It was good. It was really good. Very very good.
Jai, thank you. We're glad you like it.
Uh,
Okay. Can everyone see my screen moving?
yes, I can see it. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I'm so afraid that it gets frozen again. All right. Are we ready to read?
Yes.
I probably won't be able to read, but I'll be hearing.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so would someone
Okay,
else like to start?
I can start. Butler, Pennsylvania, difficult. Pennsylvania, the first testing ground. By the grace of Lord Krishna, the Americans are prosperous in every respect. They are not poverty stricken like the people in general are satisfied so far as their material needs are concerned, and they are spiritually inclined. When I was in Butler, Pennsylvania, about City, I saw there many churches and they were attending regularly. This shows that they are spiritually invited by some churches and churches. I spoke there and they appreciated it and present rewards. When I was speaking to the students, they were very eager to hear about the principle of Srimad Bhagavatam. But the clergymen were cautious about allowing students to me so patiently. They feared that the student might be converted to Hindu ideas as natural for any religious sect. But they did not know that devotional service of the Lord Krishna is the common religion for everyone, including even aborigines and cannibals in the jungle. From a letter to Sumati Murariji, the bus came swinging out of the terminal into daylight of the Manhattan, riding along in the shadows of skyscrapers through the asphalt street crowded with people and into heavy traffic bound towards the Lincoln Tunnel. The bus entered the tunnel and emerged on the Jersey side of the Hudson River, continuing down to the New Jersey like past fields of huge oil tanks and sprawling refineries. The Manhattan skyline was on the left, while 3 lanes of the traffic sped 60 miles an hour in each direction. Newark Airport was up close by on its visible on the ground. Electric power lines spanning aloft between steel towers stretched into the horizon. Srila Prabhupada had never before witnessed anything. He was now seeing for himself that American culture was based on the passion for more and more sense gratifications, and it was the same scene of madness. For what important rushing to and fro at the breakneck speed. He could see their goals advertised on the billboards. Of course, he had many times traveled the road of Delhi to Vrindavan, but it did not have many advertisement. A traveler would see sites, streams, temples, home, in their fields, farmers in their fields, Most people went travel by ox cart or bicycle, and in Vrindavana, even the ordinary passerby greeted in the names of God. Jai Radhe. Now there were factories outside Delhi, but nothing like this. The cumulative effect, the materialistic punch of these fields of oil tanks, mammoth factories, and billboards alongside the crowded superhighway, meet illicit sex, intoxication, and the gambling, the very scenes Srila Prabhupada had come to preach against. Roadside restaurant in the form of steaks and hamburgers, and no matter what the by the lusty looking woman. But Prabhupada had come to teach the opposite. The happiness is not sense gratification, and and that only went from the mode of passion, which leads to a sinful act, and one became eligible for the eternal happiness of Krishna consciousness.
Okay, I can read if nobody is reading.
Yes, please.
Okay. Prabhupada felt compassion. The compassion of a Krishna conscience had been explained in an age long ago by Prahlad Maharaj. That there are many saintly persons indeed, but they are interested only in their own deliverance, not caring for the big cities and towns. They go to the Himalayas or the forest to meditate with vows of silence. They are not interested in delivering others. As for me, however, I do not wish to be liberated alone. Leaving aside all these poor fools and rascals, I know that without Krishna consciousness, without taking shelter of your lotus feet, one cannot be happy. Therefore, I wish to bring them back to shelter at your lotus feet. The scenery gradually changed to the Pennsylvania countryside, and the bus sped through long tunnels in the mountains. Night came, and it was late. After 11, when the bus entered the heavily industrialized of the Allegheny River, Srila Prabhupada couldn't see the steel mills clearly, but he could see their lights and their industrial fires and smoking stacks. Millions of lights shone throughout the city's prevailing dinginess. When the bus finally pulled into the terminal, it was past midnight. Gopal Agarwal was waiting with the family Volkswagen bus to drive Prabhupada to Butler, about 1 hour north. He greeted Prabhupada with folded palms and welcomed Swamiji. Bowing from the waist several times of Gopal's doing, his father, a Mathura businessman with a fondness of sadhus and religious causes, had requested him to host the Swamiji. This wasn't the first time his father had arranged for a sadhu acquaintance to come to America. Several times he had sent sponsorship papers for Gopal to sign, and Gopal had obediently done so, but nothing had ever come of them. So when the sponsorship letter for A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami signed and returned it, thinking that this would be the last they would hear of it. But then, just a week ago, a letter had come. Sally Agarwal had opened it and then, in alarm, called to her husband, "Honey, sit down, listen to this." Srila Prabhupada had enclosed his picture so that they would not mistake him. The Agarwals had looked curiously at the photograph. "There'll be no mistake there," Gopal had said. Okay, maybe somebody else can read.
Would John not read?
Otherwise, Sadbuj Prabhu, would you like to read?
Yes, sure. Expecting Agarwals were simply American people, according to Sally Agarwal, who had met her Indian husband while he was working as an engineer in Pennsylvania. What would they do with an Indian Swami in their house? Prabhupada was a shock for them, but there was no question of not accepting him. They were bound by the request of Gopal's father. Dutifully, Gopal had purchased Srila Prabhupada's ticket from New York, arranged for the agent from Traveler's Aid to meet him, and dutifully he had driven tonight to meet him. So it was with a mixture of embarrassment, disbelief, and wonder that Gopal Agarwal helped with West TV and drove back home to Butler. September 20. Butler, Pennsylvania, home of Jeep. Read a granite plaque in the city park as the town where the U.S. Army Jeep was invited in 1940 was a city of 20,000 settled amid of hills of an area rich in oil, gas, and limestone. Its industry consisted mainly of factories for plate glass, railroad cars, stores, oil equipment, and rubber goods. 90% of the local laborers were Native Americans. The nominal religion had always been Christian, mostly Protestant, with some Catholic, and in later years a few synagogues had appeared. But there was no Hindu community at that time. Gopal Agarwal was the first Indian to move to Butler. As the VV bus pulled into town, it was warm and humid. The morning edition of the Butler Eagle would soon be going to the newsstand, Red Chinese Fire of India. Prime Minister Shastri declares Chinese Communist out of dominate world. Council demand Pakistan and India cease fire in 48 hours. Somebody else, please.
No. But now I can't hear you at all.
Now?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada arrived at the Agarwal's home, Sterling Apartments, at 4 a.m., and Gopal invited him to sleep on the couch. Their place, a townhouse apartment, consisted of a small living room, a dining room, a kitchenette, 2 upstairs bedrooms, and a bath. Here they lived with their 2 young children. The Agarwals had lived in Butler for a few years now and felt themselves established in a good social circle. So little space, they decided that it would be better if the Swami took a room at the YMCA and came to visit them during the day. Of course, living space wasn't the real difficulty, it was him. How would he fit into the Butler atmosphere? He was their guest, so they would have to explain him to their friends and neighbors. Srila Prabhupada was immediately a curiosity for whoever saw him. In anxiety, Mrs. Agarwal decided that instead of having people speculate about the strange man in orange robes, living at her house, it would be better to let them know about him from newspaper. She explained her plan to Prabhupada, who laughed, understanding that he didn't fit in. Sally hurried off to a Pittsburgh newspaper office, but the interviewer wasn't able to comprehend why this person should make an interesting story. Sally then took him to the local Butler Eagle, where his presence was accepted as indeed newsworthy. September 22, a featured article appeared in the Butler Eagle. In fluent English, devotee of Hindukar explains commission to visit the West. A photographer had come to the Agarwal's apartment and had taken a picture of Srila Prabhupada standing in the living room, holding an open volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. The caption read, Ambassador of Bhakti Yoga. The article began, a slight brown man in faded orange drapes and wearing white bathing shoes stepped out of a compact car yesterday and into the Butler YMCA to attend a meeting. He is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swamiji, a messenger from India to the peoples of the West. The article referred to Srimad Bhagavatam as biblical literature and to Srila Prabhupada. It continued, My mission is to revive people's God consciousness, says the Swamiji. God is the father of all living beings in thousands of he explains, human life is a stage of perfection in evolution. If we miss the message, back we go through the processes. Bhaktivedanta lives as a monk and permits no woman to touch his food. On a 6-week ocean voyage, at the Agarwal apartment in a brass pan with separate levels for rice, vegetables and making bread at the same time. He is a strict vegetarian and is permitted to drink only milk. The mirror man, he noted. If Americans would give more attention to their spiritual life, they would be much happier, he says. So, would you read next, Lalita?
Okay, I guess there's no one else. The Agarwal as to why Prabhupada had come to America. To finance his books and nothing more. They were sure that he was hoping only to meet someone who could help him with the publication of his Srimad Bhagavatam, and that he did not want any followers. At least they hoped he wouldn't do anything to attract attention, and they felt that this was his mentality also. He didn't create waves, Sally Agarwal says. He didn't want anything. He only wanted to finance his books. Perhaps Prabhupada, seeing her nervousness, agreed to keep a low profile out of consideration for his hosts. At Prabhupada's request, however, Mr. Agarwal held a kind of open house in his apartment every night from 6 to 9. Sally: It was quite an intellectual group that we were in, and they were fascinated by him. They hardly knew what to ask him. They didn't know enough. This was just like a dream out of a book. Who would expect to meet a Swami in someone's living room in Butler, Pennsylvania? It was just really tremendous. In the middle of middle-class America. My parents came from quite a distance to see. We knew a lot in Pittsburgh, and this was a very unusual thing, having him here. But the real interest shown in him was only as a curiosity. He had a typewriter and an umbrella. That was one of the things that caused a sensation, that he always carried an umbrella. But it was a little chilly and he was balding, so he always wore this hat, a swimming cap. It was a kind of sensation. And he was so brilliant that when he saw someone twice, he knew who they were, he remembered. He was a brilliant man. Or if he met them in our apartment and saw them in a car, he would remember their name and he would wave and say their name. He was a brilliant man. All the people liked him. They were amazed at how intelligent he was. The thing that got them was the way he remembered their name. and his humorous way. He looked so serious all the time, but he was a very humorous person. He was forbidding in his looks, but he was very charming. He was the best guest I have had in my life, because when I couldn't spend time with him, he chanted, and I knew he was perfectly happy. When I couldn't talk to him, he chanted. He was so easy, though, because I knew he was never bored. I never felt any pressure or tension about having him. He was so easy that when I had to take care of the children, he would just chant. It was so great. When I had to do things, he would just be happy chanting. He was a very good guest. When the people would come, they were always smoking cigarettes, but he would say, "Pay no attention, think nothing of it." That's what he said, think nothing of it, because he knew we were different. I didn't smoke in front of him. I knew I wasn't supposed to smoke in front of Gopal's father, so I sort of considered him. He didn't make any problems for anybody. One evening, a guest asked Prabhupada, "What do you think of Jesus Christ?" And Prabhupada replied, "He is the Son of God." Then he added that he, the guest, was also a son of God. Everyone was interested to hear that the Swami accepted Jesus Christ as the Son of God. Gopal. His intent was not to have you change your way of life. He wasn't telling anybody they should be. What he wanted you to do was to follow what you are, but be better. He didn't stress that we should give up many things. Srila Prabhupada followed a regulated daily schedule. Every morning he would walk the 6 or 7 blocks from the YMCA to Sterling Apartments, arriving there about 7. When he had first landed in New York, he had in his luggage a large bundle of dried cereal, similar to rolled oats. This supply was enough for several weeks, and every morning at breakfast he would take some milk. At 7:45, Gopal would leave for work, and around 9:30, preparing his lunch in the kitchen. He made his chapatis by hand without even a rolling pin. He worked alone for 2 hours while Mrs. Agarwal did housework and took care of her children. At 11:30, he took prashad. When he cooked, he used only one burner. The bottom level pot created the steam. He had the dal on the bottom, and it created the steam to cook many other vegetables. So for about a week, he was cooking this great big lunch, which was ready about 11:30, and Gopal always came home for lunch around about 12. I used to serve Gopal. He would go back to work, but it didn't take me long to realize that the food the Swami was cooking, we'd enjoy too. So he all of us. Oh, and we enjoyed it so much. For a while, would someone else like to read?
There's Reena. Reena is
I
there.
won't be able to read. I love to read, but I'm on the road.
Oh, okay.
I'm so sorry.
Round 2 then. Oh, John.
Not back yet.
Okay, so we go for round 2 then. Karina.
Oh, she says
Yeah.
she can't read. She's on
Sally. अच्छा,
Yep, I mean round 2 because we don't have anyone else to read, I think.
Mm-hmm.
so who's reading now?
Pushpa then.
Yeah, I will start. Our fun was to show him what we knew in of America, and he had never seen such a things. It was such a fun to take him to the supermarket. He loved opening the package of okra or frozen beans, and he did not have to clean them to all those things. He opened the freezer every day and just chose these items. It was fun to watch him. He sat on a couch while I swept with the vacuum cleaner, and he was so interested in that. He talked for a long time about that. He was so interesting. So every day he did have his big fist. He really enjoyed. I would help him cut the things. He would spice it and would laugh, and we would laugh. He was the most enjoyable man. He really felt like a sort of I really felt like a sort of daughter to him, even in such a short time. Like he was my father-in-law. He was friend of my father-in-law. But I really felt very enjoyed everything. I liked him. I thought he was tremendous. After lunch about 1 p.m. and walked to YMCA, and where the Agrawals figured he must have work at his writing until 5. He would come back to their apartment about 6 in the evening after they had taken their meal. They eat meat, and so Mrs. Agrawal was careful to have it cleared before he came. When one night he came early, she said, "Oh Swamiji, we have just cooked meat, and the smell will be very disagreeable to you." But he said, "Oh, think nothing of it. Think nothing of it." In the evening, the guests would usually take coffee and other refreshments, but he would request a glass of warm milk at 9 o'clock. He would stay speaking until 9:30 or 10, and then Mr. Agrawal would drive him back to the YMCA. Prabhupada would also do his own laundry every day. He washed his clothes in the Agrawal's bathroom, hung them to dry outside. He sometimes accompanied by the Agrawals to the laundromat, was interested to see how Americans wash and dried their clothes. To Sally, he seemed very interested in the American ways and people. Sally, our boy Brish, was 6 or 7 when the Swami came. The Indian love the Indian love boys. The Swami liked Brish, and he was there when Brish was first stood and actually succeeded. The Swami stood up and clapped. It was a celebration. Another time, a Swami's shoes. And I thought, oh, those shoes, they have been all over India, and my kid is chewing on them. You know how a mother would feel. And almost every night he used to sit in the sixth next door, in the next door neighbor's backyard. We sat out there sometimes with him, and we stayed in the living room. Something happened with our girl Pamela, who was only 3 years old. I used to take her to Sunday school, and she learned about Jesus in the in Sunday school. Then she stood she would see Swamiji with his robes on and everything. She called him Swami Jesus. Wow. And his he first when it first dawned on us what was saying, what she was saying, she called him Swamiji, and Swami smiled and said, "Oh little child, sure lead them." It was so funny. Hari bol.
Maybe Gurmukh Prabhu can read. Does he want to read?
Is he muted?
Okay, maybe he's not there. Okay, I can read then. Almost every night he used to sit in the next door. We sat out there sometimes with him, or we stayed in the living room. One time something oh, oh
Oh, it's
something
okay.
okay. One time something happened with our little only 3 years old. I used to take her. Oh, I read that already. Where are we? Are we now?
Just the next paragraph.
Oh yeah. Prabhupada spoke to various. He spoke at the Lions Club in early October and received a formal document. Be it known that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami was a guest at the Lions Club of Butler, PA, and as an expression of appreciation for services rendered, the club tenders this acknowledgement. He also gave a talk at the Y and at the St. Fidelis Seminary College in Hermon, Pennsylvania, and he spoke regularly to guests at the Agarwal home. Larson, the chairman of the philosophy department State College, read in the Butler Eagle of a visiting Indian Swami. He phoned the Agarwal's home to invite Prabhupada to lecture on campus. Alan Larson. I called the number given in the newspaper article, but it turned out I was actually staying in a room at the YMCA. When I arrived, he was waiting on the street. Picked him up. He seemed very much alone. Slippery Rock, I asked him to pronounce his name for me so I would have it right, and when I introduced him to my class, he said, Swamiji Bhaktivedanta. And then he proceeded to tell me what that meant. I was not used to Indian names. He had to repeat it several times before I got it right. He showed no impatience with my slowness. Even at the early junction of our association, I was convinced that this man had an inner stability and strength that would be very, and this initial impression was further reinforced throughout. 100 students from several classes had gathered to hear the lecture, as Prabhupada, in his natural and rehearsed manner, walked down the aisle, up steps, and onto the plain wooden stage. He sat down and began softly singing Hare Krishna. His eyes spoke, without a lectern or microphone, and answered questions lasted only 15 minutes and ended abruptly with a bell signaling the next class.
Sadbuch Prabhu?
Alan Larson. After the first class, I heard a short conversation with the Swamiji, with sitting outside on the bench on the campus lawn. Most of the time, when he was not directly engaged in conversation, he would repeat a short prayers while moving prayer beads through his fingers. Cross alleged, and we were speaking back and forth. He said that around us were beautiful, and he asked, "What kind of tree are there?" I replied, "They are shade trees." Then he said that it was too bad they weren't or not trees to provide food and benefit people. 1:00 Prabhupada lectured again. Afterward, he accompanied Dr. Mohan Sharma, faculty who had attended the lecture, and his 16-year-old daughter, Mini, to Dr. Sharma's campus residence. Prabhupada accepted warm milk and dried fruit, and at Dr. Sharma's request, blessed the forehead of his daughter in the kitchen. Around 3:00, Professor Larson drove him back to Butler. Alan Larson. The Swamiji seeing himself as an Indian scholar who had come for a short time to do translation work. I never see him as a missionary, but during the course of the day, there grew in me for this man, because he was unmistakably a good man who had found his way to a stability and peace that is very rare. The lectures in Pennsylvania gave Prabhupada his first readings. Message would be received in America. At Common here in Boston, he had stated in his poem, "I am sure this transcendental message penetrates. They will certainly feel gladdened and thus become liberated from all unhappy conditions of life." It was actually being tested in the field. Would they be able to understand? Were they interested? Would they surrender? October 15. Srila Prabhupada received a letter from Sumati Morarji in Bombay. Puja Swamiji, I am in due receipt of your letters dated at 24th ultimo, and glad to know that you have safely reached the USA after suffering from seasickness. I thank you for your greetings and blessings. I know by now you must have recovered fully from sickness and must be keeping good health. I was delighted to read that you have started your activities in the States and have already delivered some lectures. I pray to Lord Balakrishna to give you enough strength to enable you to carry the message of the Bhagavatam. I feel that you should stay there until you fully recover from your illness and return only after you have completed your mission. Here, everything is normal. With respect, yours sincerely, Sumati Morarji. Maybe somebody can continue.
Thank you. It's 7:59. Oh, well, it's 8 now. Should we end here?
I think it's nearly over the chapter. I look at the cursor.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
So we finish it off.
Okay. It's your turn, right?
Yeah, or if Gurmukh Prabhu is here, he can read a little bit.
Yeah, I will go, Mataji.
Yeah.
Do it, Sach.
I'm just waiting the screen to be cleared. So down a bit, Mataji. Bit down because my half screen I'm reading on mobile. So at any rate, he had spent long enough in Butler.
Prabhu, can you read the first paragraph? The one before that?
You can go down because my screen is covered by the people who are attendees.
Now can you see it?
Yeah, that's fine. Prabhupada regarded the last line of this letter as especially significant. His well-wisher was urging him to stay in America until he had completed his mission. He had told the immigration official in New York that he would be staying in America for 2 months. I have 1 month's sponsorship in Butler, he thought, and then I have no support. So perhaps I can stay another month So he had said 2 months. Srimati Morarji, however, was urging him to stay on. He saw that the prospects for preaching to the Americans were good, but he felt he would need support from India. At any rate, he had spent long enough in Butler, and he now had 1 month left in America. So he decided to go to New York City and try to preach there before his time was up. But first, he wanted to visit Philadelphia, where he had arranged a meeting with Sanskrit professor Dr. Norman Brown at the University of Pennsylvania. Mrs. Agarwal was sorry to see him go. Sally, after a month, I really loved the Swami. I felt protective in a way, and he wanted to go to Philadelphia. But I couldn't imagine. I told him I could not imagine him going to Philadelphia for 2 days. He was going to speak there and then to New York. But he knew no one in New York. If the thing didn't pan out in Philadelphia, he was just going to New York, and then there was no one. I just couldn't imagine. I made me sick. It made me sick. I remember the night he was leaving, about two in the 2 in the morning. I remember sitting there as long as he could wait before Gopal took him to Pittsburgh to get on that bus. Gopal got a handful of change, telling him how to put the money in the slot so that he could take a bath at the bus station. Because he was supposed to take a bath a few times a day. And Gopal told him how to do that and told him about the automates in New York. He told him what he could eat and what he couldn't eat, and he finds in a sock. And that's all he left us with. As a sannyasi picking up and leaving one place for another, as a mendicant preacher, he had no remorse about leaving behind the quiet life of the Butler YMCA, and he had no attachment for the domestic habitat where he would cook and talk with Sally Agarwal about vacuum cleaners and American ways. But why he had gone to Butler and why was he going to New York? He saw it as a Krishna's grace. He wanted to be an instrument for distributing Krishna consciousness. His stay in Butler had been helpful. He had gotten first-hand and he gained confidence that his health was strong and his message communicable. He was glad to see that America had ingredients for his Indian vegetarian diet and that the people could understand his English. He had learned that casual one-time lecture here and there were of limited value, and that although there would be opposition from the established religions, people individually were very much interested in what he had to say. On October 18, he left Butler via Philadelphia for a New York City.
Jai. Thank you. Jai Srila
Jai.
Prabhupada.
Yes.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.